In the last video, I showed you how to create a door with a animation that would open whenever you walk up to it. If we look at that here, we can walk up to the door. It's going to open. You can walk through the door, closes, and then we can do it again from this side. And we're triggering that animation and the sound that goes with it through scripts, but the animation itself was brought in as animation components on the door itself and on the hierarchy of the door that I created in Maya. And I showed you two ways of doing it in the last video, one with the animator and also one with an animation component. So they're done differently. So make sure you check those videos out if you haven't looked at them. In this video, I want to show you how to create a wall for this door that is going to be part of a new structure that will have texture maps that have transparency on them so that we can see through the windows, but it's not actually modeled. It's a transparency map on a PNG texture, and then also doing some normal maps to make it look bumpy as well. So we're going to go through that process of modeling inside of Maya. I'm going to go over to Maya, and we have the door here already made, and I want to create a wall to go with this door. So I'm just going to create it sort of around the door, and I might as well start with going into make sure I'm in modeling, and we want to create a cube by clicking on the cube symbol, polygon cube symbol here, or going to create polygon primitives cube. Either way, that's going to create a cube at the 0, 0, 0 in our world space. And then we need to switch to the scale by hitting the R key on our keyboard or picking the manipulator on the left-hand tools bar here. And we'll go ahead and scale that out in X. However far we think it should go to make this door the size that we want. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in 8 on that door. I'm going to give me a little space around each side of the door, and then I'll go ahead and scale it up. And in this case, I'm scaling up in Y. Maybe I'll go ahead and type in 5 to make that an even number. And then I'm hitting the W key to switch to my move manipulator. And I'm just going to move it up and place it so that it's flush with the bottom of my door. If we wanted to, we could switch our shading to wireframe so we could see where the door is. We could also hit our space bar to go into our orthographic views and go to our this front view here, and we can also put that into switch our shading to wireframe, and we can see then exactly where the bottom of that door is and really line it up with the bottom of that door. And then we can check and see how much space we have above it. You know, maybe it's not the right size. Maybe we want to go a little wider with this. Let's go all the way out to 10. And we'll go up a little bit more. So we'll make that Let's just go to 6 on that, and we'll move it up until the bottom of it is flush with the door. So that's my wall. I can see that the door fits within that. I've got a little space for a window on each side and a little space above it as well. Now I'm going to hit the space bar again and go back to my 4 views, and the top view is the one which is going to show me the thickness of this wall. And if I also switch my shading to wireframe, I can zoom in a little bit and see how thick the door is. And the door is not very thick. This wall is pretty thick, but I'll go ahead and go back to scale with the R key and scale it a little bit so that the wall's not quite as thick as it was. So I got about a 0.78 scaling, something like that. You can make it 0.75. So it's 3/4 of 1 unit, and it's definitely thicker than the door. So the door will sit in that wall a little bit. And if it's if it still seems too thick, you can make it a little thinner. Okay, so I've got a wall shape for my object here, and all of that looks fine. I'll go back in a second. I'll go back to my shaded view, but before I do that, I'm going to select my door object, and I'm going to make sure that I select the door in the outliner so that I know that I have the door, and I'm going to duplicate it. Control D to duplicate it and get a new door. And you could also do that under Edit, Duplicate. And I'm also going to unparent that door. I don't want it to be parented underneath the hierarchy that I have for my door, because this is not actually, I'm going to use this to cut a hole in this wall. So it'll make it a little easier maybe if you go ahead and right-click that door and assign it a new blend material so that it's not going to have the door texture on it anymore. And we can also then, in scaling mode, make sure you have your scaling manipulator on. We can go and scale this door out so that it's thicker. And if I look here, I'm at a scaling of 4.235 in Z. Now the important thing is that I want to scale it so that it's definitely cutting through the door. And if you switch from shading back to smooth shade all, you can kind of see how I'm cutting in to that door. Now you might also want to make it not quite so tight. You might want to scale it a little bit in Y, just a touch in Y and a touch in X. So I've got 1.033 in X and 1.011. I would just make those maybe evenly scaled. I'll just do 3.3 for both of them, so that those are a little bigger than the actual door. And I want that because I want this to cut a hole out in this wall. So I don't want to make it so tight that when I put my colliders on my models inside of Unity that they're actually within each other and going to react to each other. So that wouldn't be good. You want to make sure that the door is definitely smaller than the actual hole for the door. So I'm making this just slightly bigger in my scaling numbers. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the, under mesh, I'm going to do a Boolean and a difference. So, so we'll go ahead and select the wall first, and we'll go ahead and let's name this wall so we know what it is. And then we have this door hole that we're going to use, or yeah, let's just call it the door. We'll call it door hole. So I'm going to select the wall. I'm going to shift select, hold shift down, and select the door hole. Actually, before I do this, let's go ahead and make sure that Maya understands the shapes of these objects, that it's not going to be confused or anything. So I'm going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History on the wall, and also on this door hide. So we can do both of those. And when we go to, we can also go to Modify Freeze Transformations so that all of the scaling for these objects go back to 1 to 1 to 1. And all of my translates go back to 0. That is useful because that sets every change that we've done into place. So all the creation attributes for the wall were removed when we deleted history, and then all of the transforms were reset when we modified freeze transformations. And it's an important thing to do if you want Maya to understand that this is the shape of the object that you want. This is now the default shape of these objects. So now when I go and do the Boolean, it's not going to get confused about what kind of shapes we're using. And we'll just go to Mesh and Booleans, and we want to do a difference. And you can open up your options to see what's in there. And you can see that we have a legacy Boolean algorithm, which we're not going to use. We want to use the one here that is going to just create a hole in the wall. So we don't want to create any extra geometry from the cube that we're using for the door hole. We just want to use the normal application for this particular Boolean. And Boolean basically means that it's one or the other. Boolean, means true or false in coding. In this case, this operation is basically it's just cutting. It's either going to cut a hole or add two objects together. And so you're either going to have the original or the new one. Let's just go ahead and we're going to cut a hole. And we can see now that the hole is cut. So the door is now sitting within that space of the hole. And that's the original door that we have animation on. And you can see that it's not quite right. It's actually going through the wall itself there a little bit. So that's maybe a little bit of an issue.
Maybe we need to make this door a little wider so that it's not going to do that. Or we could just move these components over a little bit so that they're going to fit better with this door. So if we want to do that, if we don't want this kind of intersection going on, if the door opens fairly wide, then we would need to go ahead and, I would say, go to wireframe so that we can see what we're doing. And I would also switch back to hit your space bar and switch back to the front view. Now I do have this Boolean options here that opened up, and I don't really need those. So I'm going to just, with this object selected, I'm going to freeze transforms again so that it freezes this into place. If I go over to my attribute editor, you're going to see that there's a Boolean node there with some options that you could change. You could change your operation to a different one if you chose the wrong one by accident, or you were just experimenting with different ways that this Boolean tool works. But if you have it the way you want it, then you don't want this node there. So again, that is edit delete by type history. We'll get rid of that Boolean node. It's gone now. And so that's a permanent cut. So what I want to do is take this door opening and make it a little bigger to accommodate the opening of the door so that I don't have the kind of intersection problem that I have right now. So I'm going to right click the model itself, the wall model, and I'm going to choose vertex. So you have all these different components or attributes that you can choose. These are really the components on this object, and vertices is one of them. So I'll choose vertex. And then I can drag a selection box around all of these points and switch to the scale manipulator. So I just hit R, and I'm going to scale it out so it's wider. And I'm also going to just drag a selection box around the top ones and hit W to get the move manipulator. I'm going to move it up a little bit. So I've just made the opening a little bigger. And I don't know exactly what that should be, but I will adjust it again after I pull out some extrusions on the faces to connect them to the door. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and switch back to object mode for a moment. And if I close the door, I can see that the door is significantly smaller now than the opening. And what I want to do is I want to extrude out the edges in this door. So I'm going to hit the space bar to go back to my 4 views, and I'm going to put my cursor in the 3D view and click again. And what I want to do here is I want to zoom in and select the faces on the inside of this door frame. So you're going to do that by switching to from your Maya Classic workspace in the upper right of your interface to the Modeling Standard workspace, which will give me the modeling toolkit where I can actually use some different tools for extruding these faces and scaling them down so that they fit the door. So I'm going to do that by right-clicking and choosing face. And that's going to let me highlight the face components on this model. And I'm going to click on the side one and then hold shift down. I'm going to click on the
top inner one and the other side so that I get all three of those faces. And then I'm going to choose extrude over in my modeling toolkit. Now extrude is going to allow me to scale these faces down towards the center of the door if I activate the scale tool. So I just duplicated the faces by hitting extrude, and I want to scale those down so they kind of come towards the door. And you might want to actually switch back at this point with your space bar to the front view so that you can scale it and see exactly where it's going to. So what I want to do is mostly scale it in X till it gets close to the door, and I might want to actually move it down a little bit in X so it fits the top of the door. And then it's actually going into the base of the door as well. So it's kind of fitting that door as much as I can. Again, you don't want it to intersect the door. Be careful not to do that, because if you intersect the door, then you might have problems with your collision detection once you get these into Unity. So I just scaled it up uniformly a little bit just to make sure it's not getting too close to the door. And then if I hit my space bar again, go back to my perspective view, and I look at what I have a edge which is coming into the door. And so it's kind of like a door frame. I might want to actually scale it this way a little bit so it's a little closer to where the actual door is, the width of the door. So now that door frame kind of goes back into where the door is, and I can see that from all those sides by holding my Alt key down and using my left mouse button to orbit. So that kind of makes a nice door frame. Now, I may still get some intersection of this door. It probably would make more sense for me to actually select the outpost itself and put the move tool on by hitting the W key and just moving that door out a little bit to the front so that it's going to be rotating from the closer to the front, and therefore we'll get less intersection. Now if I want to check that, I'm going to go back to my Maya Classic and I'll move my timeline to see how my door animates, and I can see whether I've got intersection still going on. You may still have some intersection going on. If you do, then you could go in and select the object that is the wall object again. Make sure you're in vertex mode. And then you could select the vertices that are on each side and move them out. Probably that would be easier if I switch back to wireframe mode again so I can actually see those vertices without the door in the way. So if I wanted to do this evenly on the inside and outside, I wouldn't have to. I could just do this on the outside, but I can drag a selection box around those vertices on the front and the back of this wall. And I can hold Shift down and do the same thing on the other side. And I can orbit around to see that I got all the vertices that I wanted to get. And then if I go into scale, I could scale that out a little bit more to try and get the intersection to happen a little less. So the more that moves out, the more it will actually accommodate that door a little bit more. Now, it may be just that that's going too far, and it doesn't make sense for me to keep trying to adjust the door because maybe the door just opens much further than a door should open. And in that case, maybe it makes more sense for me to go back to the door animation, which is on the hinge, and go find the keyframe, which I can see is red and at 72, and that's for the door being open, and then just adjust the channel box for that to not be open quite so much. It really probably would not open that much. So I could switch back to my rotate manipulator with the E key, and I could rotate that back a little bit to where I actually think that would be more accurate for opening the door. And so once you get that to something that you think looks a little better, then you could go ahead and right click the channel and key select it again, and that just will overwrite the old key, and now it opens just that amount. I'm going to export the door again with the wall so that I don't have to have all these things separate. I can just export them together once I finish the wall. So it's fine. That animation will actually export with it then. So maybe I could maybe move the edge of the door a little bit more, or one thing that I noticed is my door is a little bit thick. I mean, I did want a pretty heavy metal door, but it is a little bit thick. I could go to the door and just go to my local scaling on that door and just scale it down a little bit so it's not quite such a thick door. And there's no animation on that part, so that's going to reduce the amount of intersection. It actually makes it a little bit easier to walk through because it's not taking so much space. It doesn't affect my animation at all. And it's actually sitting a little better into that door frame. I could even go to the outpost object and move it out a little bit more, I think, because it looks like maybe it's it's close to flush. So that's fine. Let's take a look at it. Now that looks pretty good. A little bit of intersection at the top there. You're not going to see that in the game because you're going to be walking up to the door from the level, eye level of the door. So what you're going to see is you're going to see it from this level. And I don't think that intersection is going to be noticeable. So we have now a door opening that looks pretty good. And we want to create a texture map for this wall. And I want windows in this wall, but I don't want to model the windows because that's just more geometry. It takes more time. And I would like to just do some windows with a texture map that is going to have transparency in the texture map. So I'm going to right click and go back to object mode. And in object mode, I'm going to go ahead and delete my history because you build up various little tweaks and stuff that you do as you're moving vertices around, and those become nodes called polytweak 1 and things like that in your history. So the problem with that is you don't really need those once you finalize your model, and also it makes it harder to get to your material node because it keeps pushing it to the right in the attribute editor. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Edit, Delete by Type History, and it will get rid of all of the main ones there. So once you do that, I'm going to go and right-click my model again, and I want to assign a favorite material blend to it. And it will select the blend node, but I'm going to go back and click on the wall 1 object so that I can check it and make sure it looks like it has all the history deleted on it. Now I only have a transform node called wall 1, a shape node, and a blend node, and all of those look fine. So what I want to do is in order to work on this texture and have something to put into the color channel, I need to go and set the UVs for this wall. So I've deleted everything, and I may also want to go to freeze transformations again. I don't think I changed the transformations, but it can't hurt to freeze them again. And then I'm going to switch from Maya Classic workspace to the UV editing workspace. And you can see that I have some unusual things on this. It was originally a cube, but now it looks kind of like a cube. It's got some of the original cube UVs, but then we've got some of these edges here as well that we created. So what I'm going to do is try to, I can see that Maya's not really recognizing the real shape of this object because the front face and the back face of this wall are the biggest, are taking up the biggest space. And so they should be taking up the biggest area in the texture space as well. And they're not. They're fairly small. So I want to go in and hit the face selection in my UV toolkit and then hit all so that I make sure that I have all my faces selected. And then I'm going to go down to where it says create, and if it's collapsed, make sure you open it up. And I want to create the automatic UVs. So I'm going to use the automatic setting here and click on that. And it did a pretty good job of recognizing the shape and sort of making the front face and the back face. And if I want to know which faces those are, I can right click and choose UV shell, and they're going to highlight red when I go over them. So I can see that this one is the front face and the other one is the back face because positive Z is going towards me. And all of these other ones are different parts of the edges in the doorway. So that's fine. I can work with that. It probably makes more sense to try to rearrange these so they take up a little more space. I also sometimes like to make them so that they're more the way that I would look at them inside of Maya. So these are kind of turned on their side, which will make it kind of more difficult to actually work on them as texture maps if they're in a very different orientation than what they're finally going to be on the wall. So it might make more sense for you to go in. We're going to do face selection mode again. I'm going to just select the front face here, and I want to go to my transform tools in here, and I want to rotate these. Now, the question is, do I want to rotate these inner faces on the walls as well? Do I need those to sort of continue with the wall? And that might actually not be a bad idea. So what I could do is go ahead and select those with it and rotate them counterclockwise, so that the front wall is going to be facing the way it would be facing when I see it. And I can put it up here, say in the corner. And I may actually want to scale it up, but I'll leave it there for right now. And then if I do this one, I can select that one and I can rotate it clockwise. And that way, I can both see them both, the front and the back, in the way that I would see those when I'm looking at them inside of Maya on the wall. And that's just going to make it more intuitive and easy for me to texture map those with the windows and the wall texture that I want to put on it. Now the scale on these might be a little bit small, but what you can do is you can go ahead and run an automatic layout on it to kind of try to fill up that entire space. So if we want to do that, we want to make sure everything is selected, so we can go back to all again, and then we can just try a layout and see how that fills up the space. And it actually did a really good job of filling up the space. My front and back walls are pretty much as big as I could possibly get them in this one-to-one texture space, this UV space. And it actually moves some of these other pieces inside of the doorways here. So that's fine, as long as they're not overlapping. That's going to be fine. You might want to go in and select some of those and just sort of move them around. If they're not butted up against each other, sometimes that's better, just because that way you don't have to be quite as careful when you're working inside of Photoshop. And like this piece right here, I kind of know it goes with this other piece that's the same size, so it makes more sense for me to move it over into this little space rather than place it over here in the doorway. And then I can take these other two pieces that are similar and I can just sort of center them in the doorway. So that's going to be easier for me to texture map those different pieces. And they're a good size now. So at this point, it makes sense for me to go ahead and save all of these out as a UV map that I can open in Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to select all the different pieces. I just drew a selection box under it. If you're not sure if you're getting all of it, you can just go and hit all again. And then I want to go to image, and I'm going to do a UV snapshot for the wall. And this is going to go into my source images folder, which is fine. It's a 2048 by 2048 PNG texture. And again, that's fine too. I'll go ahead and hit browse. And I'm going to give it a name. Let's call this one wall demo video 1. Or actually, yeah, let's call it UVs. So I'm doing wall demo video UVs as my name. And I'll go ahead and save that. It's going into my source images folder. I'm using edge color of black because when the PNG comes into Photoshop, it's going to be transparent, but then I'm going to flatten it and it'll become white and the black color will show up on that. So I'll go ahead and apply and close that. And it should be there. If I go out and look into my source images folder, I should find that wall demo video UVs. So there it is. I'll go ahead and right click it and we'll do an open with Photoshop. And you can see that it's kind of hard to see with the checkerboard pattern when it comes in transparent. Just go in and go to your layers, your little pancake symbol, and flatten the image. It'll just make it white. And I can see all the different parts of this now. So at this point, I want to go ahead and start texture mapping the main parts of the wall. And I know which is the front. It's the top one here, and the bottom one's right under it. And I've shown before, and the other ones that I've done, is that I'm using some textures from Wild Textures that are free to use, and we would give credit if we have game credits later on. So here is the texture map that I decided I wanted to use for my wall. It's this Big Stone Blocks wall. It's a 4K texture. And then I did some searches for window textures, and I found this one that is under free textures site, Blogspot, and it's this sort of Tudor window. So I went ahead and saved that, and I'm going to use that as well on the window part. So I have those two texture maps, just downloaded them and opened them in Photoshop. And the first thing I'd want to look for at the 4K textures is change the size. I'd want to go to image size, and instead of a 4096, I'd want to do 2048. And say OK to that. And I might want to adjust some saturation if I want a little bit more color on those rocks. I might pull the saturation up. The values look fine. I'll go ahead and leave those the way they are. And that's going to be my basic texture map. Now, I'm not concerned like I was in previous videos where I was doing terrain textures that I needed to repeat the pattern. So I don't need a repeatable texture here because if I repeat it, I'm going to repeat it manually. I'm just going to paste this into the wall, and it's going to be just one wall. So I will try it out. I might repeat it, and it's useful if it does have repeatability built into the texture, but I don't have to have that. So for this, I would just go ahead and select everything and do an edit copy and go over to your UVs and try and edit paste. So I would want to sort of isolate the area that I'm working in. So I'm going to use my magic wand tool, and I'm going to click in the empty area of the upper wall here and do an edit, paste special, paste into. And I can see it comes out really big. I don't want that big of stones on my wall, so I'll go ahead and do an edit free transform, and we'll see if we can make that fit better. So I'm going to scale that down, And how I think I would want it would be something like it's going to go to the middle of the door and then repeat symmetrically, or it doesn't have to necessarily repeat symmetrically. I could repeat it right where it's leaving off here. That would be fine. So if I want to do that, so I've scaled it sort of to fit this one side. And then might be better if I don't have it completely symmetrical. So if you can make it a little bit asymmetrical, then it might actually look better. So I'll go ahead and this is being pasted in as is with a mask. And what I could do is I could duplicate this layer. I'll go ahead and apply what I have there. And then I could duplicate the layer. And now I have another one that's similar, but with a different mask, but the same type of mask. And I could move this. Now I'm going to hit Control Z to undo. I'm going to hold Shift down, and I got my Move tool on, and it's going to force it to shift straight to the right, and I'm going to shift it until it hits right at the edge of the other texture map. You can see it left a little bit of a white edge there, so I'm going to just use my arrow keys to edge it back a couple of pixels so that it connects perfectly to the previous texture. And that works because it is a seamless texture, so I knew those were going to match up. There is still a little bit of a repetitive pattern. I can see these rocks are repeated over and over again. But we could change that. We could do a little bit of cloning if we wanted to make that not so obvious. But I'll go ahead and leave it the way it is. I think it looks fine. We could try inversing it. So if I was going to inverse this, but it probably wouldn't look right, but let's just try it. If I do an edit, free transform, flip horizontal, I could flip this horizontally. And now what it's doing is it is actually connecting well. I don't see a seam there, but it's changing the pattern. It's mirrored the pattern. So now the blocks which were coming across that looked very symmetrical, or not very symmetrical, but very repetitive, now are symmetrical and it's less repetitive. So doing those couple of things of offsetting it a little bit and then inverting it, the second one, makes it just a little less obvious that there's a repeating pattern there. So I'll go with that. So once I have that one working, this has to be all one piece, so I can go ahead and merge it down. So it might ask me to apply the mask, and you would want to do that at this point. And then I am not going to do the same thing on the back, or I am actually. I do want to save time, and I'm just going to use the same map on the front and the back of this wall. Now, you probably wouldn't do that if you were trying to make a nice model that has an interior and an exterior to the room that we're building. But that would take me more time to create that interior wall, so I'm going to go ahead and just copy the exterior wall to the interior wall, and that'll be fine. So that means that I'm going to continue working on this interior wall until I have it done, and then I'll duplicate it for the exterior wall, or vice versa. So I'm actually working on the exterior wall right now. So let's go ahead and continue working on this. We have these pieces here and they're going to need a texture map of the wall in them as well, and so are the pieces in the middle here. Now, these pieces actually fit across this way, and I'm not sure if it's going to, you have to decide whether that's going to work for you or not, to place them, say, horizontal. I could rotate this texture, and maybe that's what I would do. But let's just try adding in some other texture maps. These are the most important ones that you see out here, and then these are less important. You don't really scrutinize those that much, although these you may see. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this into that, and I'll go ahead and use the same, I'll just do the same process. So let's just go and select, make sure you select the level that has the UVs on it. I'm going to shift select both these areas right here. And this part, maybe I'll do separately. So these two I'm going to edit, paste special, paste into, and then let's just free transform it, and we'll try to make it somewhat similar. And that looks pretty good. So I want to keep a little bit of continuity between the two areas there, so I could scale this up and try to make sure that it looks like there's a little bit of continuity between those, and I'll apply those. Okay, so let's work on the windows. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I want to work on the window section now. And the window section is this, and I might want to actually, because they come from different places and the stones look pretty different, I might want to go and try to put the other texture map, the stones, into these stones a little bit. So one way I could do that is I could do a select and maybe choose a color range and pick something that's specifically going to be mainly only in this outer part here. I don't want to get into the window at all. And I could try using the shift key and highlight some other areas in there. Again, I don't want it coming up in the window at all. I just want it coming up in the outer part. So that one's kind of covering much of it. I'll go ahead and say okay to that. And then, if you're worried that there's anything inside, you could put your square selection tool on and make sure you hold Control down, or actually Alt on your keyboard till you get the minus symbol on your cursor, and then you could drag over the middle area there to make sure there's no selection on the window itself. And then I could do an edit, paste special, and paste into. I could also go into select and mask to see what it is I'm going to be pasting into, and to use some of the tools here for feathering and smoothing those selections out a little bit. We could shift the edge as well to make sure that it's not going to be going into the black area or anything. And then do an edit, paste special, paste into, and that takes my texture map from the other texture map and it pastes it into this one. And it may be too big. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here and do a free transform on this. Yeah, it's really, really gigantic. So, or much bigger than the window texture. So I might want to go ahead and scale it down a little bit so that it fits the window texture a little bit more, and then move it around and see what looks the best. You know, and maybe trying to get a little bit of maybe something like right there. Get a little bit of those edges of the stones and stuff in there. And kind of fitting it where some of the different parts of this window change or have some protrusions here. And so I'll go ahead and apply that. And then it's very easy to select this window to bring it into the other image because it's got a black background around it. So I can just click my magic wand tool in there to select that on the base layer here. So, you know, if I like this layer, you probably want to go ahead and merge it down into the base layer. And then I'm selecting the outer part, so I would need to inverse it and edit copy. Again, you could check your selected mask to see that you don't need to shift your edge at all. You can also do a little feather on it because I'm going to paste this into the wall and I want it to sort of blend into the wall a little bit. So a little bit of feather on that edge might do that. Shift it into the object a little bit. I'll say okay to that, or actually say okay to that. And then we can copy it and go out and paste it in to the one we're working on. So that I would paste it to the right and left of the doorway here. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll do an edit paste. I want to make sure that it's on the top level, and we'll do a free transform. And you can see it's matching it very well. And then it's a matter of scaling it so it's going to fit the rocks that are under it. Now, maybe that, you know, I want to hold my shift key down and stretch it vertically a little bit. Trying to figure out where is the best placement for this that is going to make sense. So I'll go ahead and go with that. I'm going to apply it. And then I see that it's got less contrast than the wall behind it. So I'm going to go and go ahead and look at my levels on that. And I might want to just check those a little bit. Trying to make it sort of blend in as much as possible. Now, this doesn't have any kind of mask on it, so it might make sense for me to use my magic wand tool and select out around the empty area around this and go to layer mask and do a reveal selection, or sorry, this is outside of the object, the actual window, so we want to hide that, and that'll put a black mask around the window. And if I want to then have the window blend in a little bit, I can do a couple of things. One, with the mask selected, I could go to filter, blur, and do something like a Gaussian blur, and that's going to blur the mask and actually start to blur the edge of that mask to the point where it'll start to soften how it's blending in. Now, if I go too far, it's going to go into the window itself. I don't want that. But it will kind of automatically start to blur the edges so that that background wall is showing through more around the edge of this. So I could go ahead and do that. I think putting a little bit of blur on there works. And then if I want to selectively paint that, I can go to my paint tool, make sure you're in normal mode, and go in and start painting with your black to add more of the mask in. And you can use any of the brushes that you want. Probably you just want to use a soft round brush of some kind. And probably bring the opacity and flow down a little bit and just go in and hit a couple of places that you think maybe the underlying wall would look better coming through there. So as you're going through and just adding some of this in, blending it in a little bit, and that's going to be the one window done, and you can go back and do the other one using the same window. Just to save time, I can duplicate this over. So you might want to look at the differences in the stone textures. If one looks sharper than the other, you might want to do a sharpen on the one that looks blurry. In this case, I'm going to do a smart sharpen on it and see if I can sharpen up a little bit around some of those areas. But I think that looks okay, and we can see what that looks like inside of Maya once we get it over there. So to take this and bring it over to the other side, it'd probably be easier if I go ahead and apply this mask so it's not going to separate from the window at all. So I'll go ahead and right click and we can apply the layer. Actually, yeah, let's duplicate this layer first. We'll leave that layer mask there. Then I'm going to apply the layer mask on the duplicate. And then I'll just move it to the right, holding shift down, so it's going to be at the same level. And I'll place it over here, and we'll take a look at it. So I think that looks okay. I've tried to place it on the other side, but I'm not being entirely symmetrical about it. And I could also try to flip it if I wanted to, but I think I'm going to leave it the way it is. And if you wanted to go in and adjust some other things, you could use your eraser tool to erase things if you didn't like something, like if there was something that needed to show more wall through it. The eraser tool would do that for you. If there's some obvious repetition that you want to kind of get rid of on this side, you could do that too. Okay, so I think that looks fine. We got two windows there. And the next thing I want to do is I want to take these two windows, and I probably should have done this on the one before I duplicated it, but I'll go ahead and do it on both of them, is to merge them down together. Let's just merge them together and apply the mask. And then what I would like is I would like to cut out these windows so they're going to be transparent. And to do that, it makes sense for me to go ahead and merge down onto the main layer here and then cut them out, because then I don't have to do it. I don't have to cut out on multiple layers. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and merge down. And then I'm going to cut out the stone part in that layer. So to do that, I would select the parts that I want to cut out. So let's just pull out some guides from my rulers. And with the guides out, it makes it easier for me to select this. So I'm just going to drag a selection box, and then I'm going to hold shift down, click again, and then let go to drag the rest of the selection box. And then what I want to do is I want to cut these out. So I'm going to do an edit, cut, and that actually produces a transparent section. If I turn off my bottom layer, you can see the checkerboard pattern, that's transparent. And then I'm going to edit, paste special, paste in place. And that'll paste it exactly where it was, but on a separate layer. So then I can go to the opacity of that layer and I can make it transparent. Now it's up to you how transparent you want that to be. I'm going to bring mine down to like 50% or so. I think that should be fine. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to preserve that transparency for the final map. So the final PNG map will have that area as transparent. You can see the checkerboard pattern coming through it. Okay, so I'm using 50% or so. Let's go ahead and that's finished. So we'll go ahead and let me fit this on screen. And I think we're ready to go ahead and copy this over to the other section below it. So to do that, I'm just going to, I want to merge these two layers, the transparent layer and the main layer. Actually, let's not do that. Let's not do that yet. So instead, I'm going to shift select these two layers. So I held shift down, selecting the two separate layers here. And I'm going to duplicate these layers. So I have these duplicates and they're also selected. And then I'm going to put my move tool on and hold shift down. And I'm going to shift. Actually, let's do an edit free transform. So make sure you have both selected, free transform, and there we go. We're going to move it down, holding shift. And I just want to move it till it sort of pops into place. And that looks fine. Now the other part here did not get added to that selection. So I missed that. That's this one right here. I'll go ahead and select that one. We can go ahead and try duplicating that layer. And let's just go ahead and apply the mask. And we'll try to move that down. Again, edit free transform will allow me to move that down with shift held down, and I'll just move it down so it pops into place. So that looks like it's in the correct positions, and I'll go ahead and leave that. I just need some of these other ones to have some stone texture on them. So it doesn't really matter too much how the edges of these are going to look. I'm just going to copy the original stone texture, and I want to go to the very bottom layer, and we could just paste the whole thing in here and cover up that entire bottom layer. So actually maybe that's not such a good idea because that's going to cover up where the windows are. So I'm going to go ahead and do an edit free transform, and we'll rotate this. Let's rotate this 90 degrees. So we're -90. Type in -90 and scale it. Control Z, hold Shift down and scale it. And I'm just going to try to place that in there in such a way that it's not going to be sitting on top of where the transparent windows are supposed to be. So I'll go ahead and do that. We could duplicate this, like do it over the middle part here, and then duplicate the layer. Let's go ahead and apply it. We'll duplicate the layer and move the duplicate over. Free transform, move the duplicate over like that. So that way I'm covering up all the areas, but I'm not covering up the transparent part. So if I hide my bottom layer, I can see that the transparency is showing through. I also see a little bit of an edge showing through on the side here, so I might want to use my arrow tools and just move that over slightly and apply it. So that should cover everything. I'm not worried about the open doors holes because those are actual physical holes. It's the part which I'm trying to make transparent for the windows that's not really a hole in the geometry, but I want it to be a hole in the texture map. I'm going to go ahead and save. We'll save this as layers so that if I want to come back and adjust that transparency on the windows, I can. So let's call this wall demo video layers, and I'll save it as a PSD file, and then I can go ahead and make this into a PNG file. So I don't want to flatten it. If I go into flatten this image, it'll actually take the transparency away. What you can do is you can merge everything. So I can shift select all these layers except the base layer, and I can do a merge layers, and the transparency will be retained. And I can delete this bottom layer by right-clicking it and deleting the layer. That leaves the transparency, and I can do it then a save as PNG file. I'll choose a PNG file. And we can call it wall demo video Windows 1, or actually under, this is the color map, so underscore color, and I'll save it. Now that we have a color map saved, let's go back over to Maya and we will take a look at what that looks like before we do the bump map. So inside of Maya, make sure that you are you can go ahead and go out of UV mode back to classic mode so you can see it better, and make sure you right click and go back to object mode when you're going to assign the texture map. And in this case I have wall 1 selected, and I can see that I have the blend for this object selected in the attribute editor. So I want to place on the color channel of this blend, click in the little checkerboard symbol to the right of the color channel, choose File. It's going to bring me over to a File Attributes, and I'm going to click on the little folder symbol and find the color map that I just saved. And I'll go ahead and open it. Now you can see that it places it on there and it looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and check the wall one again by reselecting it, and I can see that the color channel has something on it because it's changed the symbol from the checkerboard to sort of a black arrow, and that means it's got a connection there. And then the transparency one also has a connection, and so it automatically read the transparency of these windows. And if I orbit around a little bit, you can see actually that there is transparency. It may be a little difficult to see if you don't have anything in there, but if I were to create, say, a sphere and move it and place it behind one of the windows and orbit around, and I deselect, you can see that you can actually see it through the sphere. Now, one problem though, or see it through the wall, but I see that the problem is that the windows are not lining up. So they're actually a little bit offset. So that looks like maybe I need to flip my map around on the back side inside of Photoshop. So if I go back into Photoshop, and these I just duplicated, I didn't flip them or anything. If I undo a couple of times, and we did save out the layers anyway, so we could go back and open that file if we needed to. But just undoing a couple of times takes me back to where I have my layers, and I can go find the one that is in the area of the bottom one, and I can go ahead and flip that around. So I'm going to select that layer, and I'll go ahead and do an image transform, and I'm going to flip it horizontally. So that's going to place the windows in a slightly different place. I can see that there's a second layer there, so I'm going to undo that. So I have actually separate layers for the windows as well as the ground, and I'll go ahead and select that, both of them, and we'll do a transform flip horizontal. Okay, and that looks like it flipped them both. Okay, so I'll go ahead and I can merge these again, just through the same process. Merge my different layers, delete the bottom layer, and then save it out. And choose a PNG. Say yes to replace it, and it's going to save with the maximum compression, and then I'll go back in once it's saved, and we'll go ahead and make sure that you have the wall selected. Go to your blend and go into the color map and reload, And you can see now that it actually looks much better. At this point, you may also want to look at how the windows look, and maybe if the wall looks too thick or you're seeing too much in there, you might want to actually scale that wall a little bit in the direction of the thickness of the wall. Now, if you look at the textures and there are any problems, this is the time to fix them, because you're about to put some bump mapping on those textures. And one thing that I can see is that there is some stretching and large spaces between the cracks on these particular texture maps on the front. The back actually looks pretty good, but the front one actually is being stretched a lot more. So we might want to look and see what that is in the UV image editor. So I'm going to go back to the UV image editor, and I want to switch to faces, and I want to hover over those faces to see if I can see which ones they are. And I can see that they're actually on the what would be the bottom or back face. So actually I was thinking that this was the front face, but that's actually the back face. And this is the front face. So I'd want to look at that and adjust those. I can see that I did a good job of placing them for the other side. And I could flip this around and place the other ones on the inside by just rotating this entire wall 180 degrees. But I could go back into the texture map and copy the one to the other, because apparently I did not do that on the previous one inside of Photoshop. So if I look at this, I can see that, yeah, this one has different setup than the one on the bottom here. And I'd probably want to copy those over. So one thing that we could do, if we wanted to try it, we could try using the clone tool and just paint the top part to the bottom part. If we look at where that is, it's going to be from about right here. So if I hold my section down for that and click right where that would be, and then I go down and find where it would start down here, I could actually paint that in. Try it again. And you want to be using 100% opacity on that. And then we could do the same thing over here. Hold the Alt key down. Find the place where those stones are going to start, and then just paint them onto there. So if I save that back out, it'll overwrite the one that I already did. Actually, I think we were in PSD mode, so we'd want to switch to PNG and make sure that we're using the correct mode and save it. And if you don't want to lose your layers, because it looks like I just saved over that, you can just undo back to where you have layers again and then resave. So just undo a couple of times. That's going to undo your clone stamps, but it depends whether if you need those layers. Then you're going to want to do that till you get your layers back. Okay, I can see that it updated and it does look different. Let's go ahead and go back to the Maya Classic and zoom in on it a little bit and see what it looks like. It definitely looks better. And like I said, I could just flip this entire thing around because I made it symmetrical. And so if I rotate the entire thing 180 degrees, it has no animation on it, so it doesn't really matter. I would just go to my channel box and in the Y, type in 180, and it would be flipped around. So I want to go back in now and make the bump mapping. So I'm going to go back to Photoshop. And the important thing about the bump map is I would like to have some of that texture that was in the windows in the bump map. So I want them to be transparent on the main color map, but I want to be able to bring up the opacity to 100% for the bump map. So I'm going and finding those and pulling that opacity back up to 100% again. And what that will let me do is it will allow me to use the texture in that window pattern to put a little bit of a bevel on the window in the bumpiness in the bump map. So let's go ahead and go with that. I need to go ahead and flatten this. And then I'll work on the bump texture. So in this case, what I want is I want all the light parts to come out and the dark parts to go forward. Well, it's kind of already set up like that to some degree, but let's just enhance it a little bit more by duplicating this layer. And we'll go ahead and do an image adjustment, and actually let's do a select color range and choose a light color here, or maybe even choose a dark color and see if you can get all the dark areas. So that's going to be in between the stones and in the windows. And that's isolating those a little bit. And you can say okay to that, and then inverse that selection and just bring it up in lightness. I don't want to make it white. I just want to bring it up in lightness a little bit. And you can inverse that selection, or just, I think all the darks are pretty dark. So I'm just going to turn the selection off to see what that looks like. Now, we could pick a color in it too if I adjust my saturation up so that I can see some colors a little better. I could pick a color in the selection to make it come out a little bit more. So if I felt like maybe the orangish colors are going to be coming out a little bit more than the others, then I could bring those lightness up even a little further. And then, going in and adjusting maybe the brightness contrast on it, pull the contrast up. So any areas that are dark are going to be coming back or going back away from you a little bit more. So let's just see what that looks like as a black and white. I'll go ahead and go to grayscale, discard my color information, and I would say it looks pretty good. You could try to pull up the contrast in levels a little bit. You can go see what those levels look like and adjust them a little bit to get a little bit more variation in the stones, so they're not all the same height in the height map that this is going to create. And you might actually, if you want certain things to come out more around the windows or something like that, you could just create like an edge around the windows to make it pop out even more, like maybe on the top or the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and leave it the way it is, and we'll see how that looks. So I'm going to go to Filter, 3D, Generate Bump Map. And when that comes up, it should give me a viewer that will show me what those stones are going to look like and what the windows are going to look like. And I can see I'm getting a little bit of the window pattern, and I'm getting pretty good stones too. And I can adjust my 3 sliders up and down to increase or decrease the effect. I don't want any too busy effect on it, so I'm trying to look at it, and I don't want something ugly like that. I want to focus on the main edges, but get a little bit of detail in there. And that looks pretty good. So once you get that the way you like it, say okay. This is our bump map. I'll do a save as. I'll choose JPEG, and we'll save it as let's see, it's going into our source images, and I want to save that as a JPEG. So it's not actually showing up because I don't have PNG selected. If I selected PNG, I could grab that name there and then go back to JPEG. It doesn't have to be a PNG because this one has no transparency on it, and this one is going to be the bump map. So let's save it. Say OK to that with full quality, and then we'll go back over to Maya, and we will go to the attribute editor and find the bump channel, which is slightly below the color and transparency channel. It says bump mapping. To the right of that, we have the checkerboard. I'll click on it, and then we'll go choose File. Brings me into the bump depth section. Here I want to switch to the File section or the File tab and click on the folder to open up and choose the bump map. And as soon as I put that on, I can see a big difference. The bumpiness is there, getting some nice effect there, and I have some of the bumpiness on the windows to bring out those sort of beveled looking texture, and the windows are still transparent. So that looks good. I think that looks like an old wall, and it's ready to be sent over to Unity. So I'll go ahead and do that by going to from modeling to rendering. I want to go to rendering module, and I'll go to the top where the context sensitive menu changes to lighting and shading, and I want to choose that. And then I want to do a transfer maps. Now in order to do transfer maps, I have to have a target and a source. So this wall is going to be my source, and I can duplicate it to create my target. We'll go ahead and do that. We'll do a Control D to duplicate it. That's going to give me a wall 2. I want wall 2, I'll rename to be wall target, just so it's easy for me to tell. I could name wall 1 to wall source as well. So I got a source and a target there, and I want to load them in here so that I can bake the map for this. So this is going to be a normal map that I want to bake. We've done these before. I actually have it already in here, so I will do the normal map. And to bake this as a normal map, I want to have the target selected. Now, right now, I duplicated one from the other. That means that there's a connection between the materials. We don't want that. So the easiest way to fix that is we'll go back to our channel box. So I have my layers over here, my display layers, and I'm going to put the target object on the target layer, and I'm going to put the source object on the source layer so that I can hide these two. And that's just so I don't have them in my way when I'm trying to make sure that the target layer doesn't have the same material on it as the source layer, because if they're sharing materials and I bake one to the other, then it's going to create a cycle and it's going to mess up the material. It's not going to come out correctly. So I need to hide that source layer so I can go in and right click and assign just a plain blend to the I don't want to assign it to the source. I think I had the wrong thing selected. Let's go back and make sure that we have the target selected and assign the blend. Okay, that's what it should look like. It's just got a plain blend on it, and it doesn't have the texture map. So I'll bring my source layer back so I can make sure that I didn't mess up my source texture. It's still there, it looks fine. So I can go ahead and do the transfer maps now without worrying about there being a cycle between the two because I duplicated it. You can also delete history on the target object to break some of those connections too. If I go and do a edit, delete by type, history on that target, it'll break those connections as well. But just to be safe, I like to put a new material on it too. So with those there, you can go ahead and do this. Make sure they're both visible in your target and source layer. Then select the target and add it to target meshes in your transfer maps. And then open up the source meshes and select this wall source and add the selected to the source. So I have wall source shape, and at the top I have wall target shape in there. So that's there. And we'll go ahead and go down to where we have the normal maps. Again, this is from previous. If it wasn't here, I could click normal. I have a diffuse color map in here, but it's turned off. And I want to bake this to my source images folder as wall demo video windows normal. Save it. And everything should be okay with the rest of it. The Maya common output should be set to 2048 by 2048, which is the original size of my map. I've been doing that for every one of them, so it's consistent. And I don't need, actually I don't need, this search envelope is actually, can go back to 1. And I'm not sure why there's a second shape in here. It could be because I froze and maybe it created a different shape node. I'm not sure. I don't think that's going to be a problem. I'll go ahead and try it. But it's a little unusual to see 2 shape nodes in here. So, okay, let's try it out. We'll go ahead and hit bake and close and see what it looks like. So I got an error message. You can see the red there. And that was that extra target shape. I'm not sure where it was coming from. I think it may have been from a previous object that I had in here and it was just remembering it. In that case, I did right click it and chose the option to remove it. So now we've just got wall target shape. I think it was looking for something that had previously been deleted. And so it was telling me that it couldn't find that shape node. So let's try it again with that deleted, and now it looks correct. and let's bake it. Okay, so here's what it ends up looking like inside of Maya after it bakes it. And we can see it has all the appropriate bumpiness. And if I look inside of the source images folder, I can find the texture maps that I did for both the color and the normal map. We can open the normal map up inside of Adobe Photoshop to see what it looks like, and that's the normal map. So let's go ahead and bring these into Unity along with the model. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my source images folder, and I want to select the color map and shift select the normal map, and I'll right click and copy those. And then I'm going to go over to my folder that is inside of my Unity project, and I'm going to right click and paste those in there so that I have those two textures now already inside of Unity, so that when the model comes in, it will automatically look for those and find them. And then I'll go back to Maya and we'll export out the wall source object here. So I'm going to go ahead and just send this over by itself. I could parent this into a hierarchy and send it over with the door, but I've already put some scripts and stuff on the door, so it would be easier for me to go ahead and send this over separately and then parent it with the door under the Outpost new object inside of Unity once I get this over there. So to do that, I'm going to select it. I'm going to go to File, and we're going to export, or actually send to Unity, and we'll use selection. And because I've done this before, I already have my project set from the last video, and it automatically went to my Models folder. So it's going in there where the door was sent to as an FBX. And I would check my FBX settings on the right. There is no animation, so it's okay if it's checked. It's not going to really do anything if there's no animation there. And I'm using automatic scale factor. So it's going to come in small to Unity, and I have to increase the size like I did the door. And embed media is on. So all the standard settings, and we'll go ahead and choose a name for it. So let's call this Wall Demo 1. This Wall Demo 1 is easy enough. And export the selection. And then it should be over there by now. I'll go ahead and click on it. I can see it turns green as it imports it. And if I go into the My Models folder, I should be able to find the Wall Demo 1, which is right here. We'll go to the model first. I know that I want this to match up with the door, so I need to match the door setting, which I set to a scale factor of 100. So if that's the scale factor I used on the door, that's what I want to use on the wall demo. I'll put that to 100 so that they're both the same, and I'll apply it. Then I will also go over to the Materials tab, and I'll set it to External Materials, and under Search Recursive Up, I'll switch to the Local Materials folder and apply it. And then I'm going to look under Rig and Animation. There is no animation, and this isn't a humanoid character, so it's really not important I set either one of those right now. It's recognizing there's no animation on there. So let's pull it in, and we'll try to place it so that it's sitting in the right place. Going to move it. Now I can see actually a door coming in with it. Oh, I think I pulled in the wrong one. Let's delete that one. This is the one I want. There it is. So we see it come in, and it's fitting pretty well. And I can actually see that it's transparent through the windows in the 3D view there, because I can see the horizon line behind it. I am going to want to, go in and check it and make sure it's as close as possible to where the door is, so it's going to fit well. But I don't think it's getting any bump mapping. So let me check the texture map on that. I will go into the inspector and to the bottom where the material is. And I can see that the normal map is not there. So let's go look at my textures. That's where I placed the normal map. Here it is, wall demo. And I will check my 2D texture. I'm going to set the aniso level up to about 8. It's set to 2048 max size, which I want. I'll apply that. And then the normal map, I need to make sure I set it to normal map, 2048, aniso level 8, and apply it. So those are ready to go. If I go back to my wall demo object again, into the materials, I'll just go ahead and make sure it's using these two materials by dragging them on to the albedo and the normal map. And I see that changed automatically. It looks much more bumpy. Let's go ahead and hit play, and we'll walk in there and take a look at it. Okay, so we can see the wall is there. If we walk up to it, we can see through the window. We also see the beveling on the window. If I walk over here, I should be able to open the door. And it looks like it's a little off, like I need to move that a little bit. Yeah, there's a little space on this one side, and it's kind of into the wall on the other, so I'm going to have to adjust that setting. Let's open the door from this side, and we'll walk through again. But it doesn't look too bad. It's just a little bit off. So we'll go ahead and hit escape on that, turn it off, and we can zoom in to it and try to move it just a little bit over. It looks like maybe a little bit down too. And that should do it. Okay, so that's how you do a texture map with transparency. It automatically took the transparency, but sometimes it doesn't. What you have to look for in the material of this object is when you look at the shader, I'm using a standard shader here, and it's set to rendering mode transparent. Sometimes they come in with opaque turned on, and in that case you won't be able to see through the windows if it's on opaque. If I switch it to that, you'll see the windows are not transparent anymore. So what I need to do is make sure that it's on transparent. If I'm using a transparent albedo map, you want it to recognize that. Okay, so that's the other things that I would want to do is I want to make sure I can't walk through that wall. Right now, if I hit play again and walk up to the wall, I could probably walk right through it. So if you don't want to be able to walk through your walls, then you need to make sure you add another component to that wall, and it's going to be a physics component And it's not going to be a box collider because we have a doorway, and if we put a box collider on this, it will actually prevent us from going through the doorway. So we actually have to use a mesh collider. That way, it's only going to make the parts of the wall have a collision on it in the areas that there's geometry and not in the area where the door is. So once you do that, it should be fine. We just need the mesh collider. You should test it out because sometimes you have to switch them to be in a different setting. So just walk up to the wall and it should stop you from walking through once you put that on there. And you should also test the door so that you can make sure that you can walk through the door, that it didn't, that the collider is not going to stop you in any way. And you can see that my door looks better. It's opening in a better place. It's going a little bit through the one side. I might have to do a little bit more adjustment on it. Actually, you know what? I think this door is not the same door that I had inside of Maya because I brought this one over earlier, so it's thicker. So I might want to actually go select that door and do what I did in the one in Maya and make it a little bit thinner than it is because it's actually sticking out quite a bit. It looks like the wall could be moved back a little bit too. So we can move the wall back a little bit and we can go to the door and scale that down a little bit so it's not quite as thick, and that should fix the way the door looks when it's opening. You can try it again. And that looks much better. Now it still looks like it's a little off. Maybe and I need to shift it to the side a little bit more. But it's pretty close. We could scale it a little bit if it needs to be. So that's all I need to do to get my wall working. I can bring in other walls and a ceiling and a floor, which I'm going to do later. But that's all you need to know to create transparent material effects on your geometry.